Chapter 5 of Alice's Adventures in Wonderland is titled Advice from a Caterpillar. Okay, so last day when we are doing chapter 4, it ended at a situation where Alice has escaped from the house of the white rabbit, and she, after wandering through the forest, met a caterpillar. Okay, it was a blue colored one. So Alice comes across a caterpillar, and it was not just a simple one, it was a caterpillar which was there um, taking hookah. Okay, so it was there taking smoking hookah on a giant mushroom. Clear? So the hookah pipe was there. The hookah pipe was. I will come to that why it is symbolic and what it refers to. What we find here is that this reference of the blue. Let me first explain. Let me first um, explain what is actually happening. Okay, so what we find here is that this description of the caterpillar will be in accordance with giving advice, as we can get uh, from the very first line or the title itself. Okay, so the girl Alice, who is staring who is there is staring at the caterpillar, and what we find here is that they stare at each other, and the very first question that the caterpillar asks Alice is, who are you? And why this is important, why this question is important? Because this question is continuously focusing on the identity crisis, or is harping on the identity crisis that was continuously being in the mind of Alice. Okay, the identity crisis was there within the mind of Alice, right? And at the same time, what we find, this question, this existential crisis, is being imposed on by the caterpillar. Why there is this identity crisis? Right? Why is that so? It is because of the changing size, the changing form of Alice. It is because of the changing form of Alice that she is in a position where she cannot understand who she is. Clear? এইখানে যে অবস্থায় রয়েছে, ক্যাটারপিলার তাকে জিজ্ঞেস করছে যে তুমি কে, সে ঠিকঠাক করে অ্যান্সার দিতে পারছে না যে সে কে। Clear? What we find here is that this fleeting or the fleeing from the white rabbit's house, what we find here is that this, after fleeing from the white rabbit's house, what we find, Alice is again 3 inches tall. Okay, so, and it is a good size to meet the caterpillar in this wonderland, because the caterpillar is also of 3 inches. Clear? So what we find? We find that there is a kind of similarness in the size, but at the same time what we find? We find that there the way the caterpillar is talking is that of arrogance. Okay, it appears as if the caterpillar knows everything. It has the knowledge of whole world. It has this audacity, it has this arrogance or rudeness that is directed towards Alice. And this rudeness, and with this rudeness he asks Alice, who are you? And what we find that Alice is in trouble explaining who she is, okay, to this antagonistic caterpillar. Okay, what we find here is that the caterpillar is questioning how it is a simple question. যে কারোর সাথে প্রথমবার দেখা হলেই সে তোমায় জিজ্ঞেস করবে তুমি কে, especially because in this wonderland we have not seen any other human beings till now. Okay, so this is a strange land, and what we find here is that this is a normal question, who you are when you are in a strange land. You should expect this kind of questions, right? But what we find here is that the question is actually intimidating because Alice does not have any answer. In despair, Alice's answer she hardly knows because she keeps changing in size and shape all the time. Clear? So, what we find that after answering that, after saying so, or after saying these words, she is dejected and she is leaving. Okay, but the caterpillar calls her back. Because the caterpillar does not see this as a problem. Why? Because it is in its nature, it is in the nature of a caterpillar to metamorphose into a butterfly, to transform into a beautiful creature. Okay, transformation is in its gene. Okay, the transformation of size and shape is entirely natural for a caterpillar. So for this person, for this caterpillar, it is not a single thing, it is not a problematic thing, right? So when a child like Alice is facing a problem in answering this question, who you are, this is not a question, this is not a problem for this caterpillar. বুঝেছিস কেন? কারণ ক্যাটারপিলার তো সবসময় একটা ট্রান্সফরমেশনের স্টেজে থাকে। ক্যাটারপিলার আজকে যা কালকে সেটা নাও থাকতে পারে, পরশুদিন সেটা নাও থাকতে পারে, সে একটা বাটারফ্লাইতে ট্রান্সফর্ম হবে। সিমিলারলি হিউম্যান বিইংসও সেরকম, তুই 10 বছর আগে যা ছিলিস আজকে সেটা না, রাইট? সো হোয়াট উই ফাইন্ড হিয়ার ইজ দ্যাট the identity of a person is always changing, right? So for example, obviously তোর নাম সেম থাকবে, কিন্তু তোর ডেজিগনেশনটা তোমার সোশ্যাল স্ট্যাটাসটাকে তো আইডেন্টিফাই করে, রাইট? তোমার ডেজিগনেশনটা তোমার আইডেন্টিটিটাকে হচ্ছে বলে। তুই হচ্ছে বা আমি হচ্ছে আমার নাম দিয়ে হচ্ছে কখনো কোথাও এক্সিস্ট করতে পারবো না, শুধু নাম দিয়ে কোথাও হবে না। তোমার সাথে আরও তুমি যা যা করো, হোয়াট ইউ আর ইজ আ স্টুডেন্ট, আমি প্রফেসর, সেই জিনিসগুলো হচ্ছে তোমার আইডেন্টিটিটাকে হচ্ছে বাড়িয়ে দেয়। অ্যান্ড দিস আইডেন্টিটি moves on, this identity continuously changes. Okay, so what we find here is that this is not a problematic thing, but for a child who has been thrown into this kind of mess or tumultuous situation, for her it is a bit difficult, to gather exactly what she is. Clear? So what we find here is that this description is very important, or this confrontation between the caterpillar and Alice, the existential question is very important, because when you are facing this challenge in life to answer yourself, answer your own identity, but at the same time the person who is in front of you has or will have this kind of changing identity itself. ক্লিয়ার? তুই হয়তো বললি যে আমার অনেক জীবনে দুঃখ, কার সামনে বললি? যে হচ্ছে পার্টিশন ফেস করে এসছে, যে যার বাড়িতে হচ্ছে এত সমস্যা যে তার ঠিক মতো খাওয়ার জন্যে না, রাইট? সো তার সামনে তোমার প্রবলেমটা তো কিছুই না। অ্যাট দ্য সেম টাইম হোয়াট উই ফিল উই নিড টু অ্যাডজাস্ট। সে যদি ভালো থাকতে পারে, তুমিও তাহলে হচ্ছে ভালো থাকতে পারো, right? So what we find here is that this hookah smoking caterpillar becomes a celebrated figure during the 1960s. um, Especially what we find, why this is so, this is because it gives a relaxed stature or relaxed attitude to this caterpillar. সে যেই হচ্ছে হুক্কা খায় বা হুক্কা খাওয়ার যে সমস্ত ইমেজগুলো হচ্ছে দেখেছিস, দ্য ইমেজেস দ্যাট ইউ হ্যাভ সিন অফ আ পারসন স্মোকিং হুক্কা, দ্য ইমেজ ইজ দ্যাট অফ আ রিল্যাক্সড ওয়ান। সে রিল্যাক্সড ওয়েতে সেই হুক্কা খাচ্ছে, ঠিক আছে? কেউ তাড়াহুড়ো করে সে অ্যাজিটেটেড হয়ে হুক্কা কেউ খাচ্ছে না, right? So what we find here is that this caterpillar is in a stage, or this caterpillar represents the stage where one is at peace with oneself. ঠিক আছে? তুমি নিজের সাথে পিসে রয়েছে, তোমার নিজের আইডেন্টিটি, নিজের কি বলবো, সত্তাটার সাথে নিজের কামনেসটাকে বজায় রেখেছো। ক্লিয়ার? So what we find here is that this caterpillar, kind of the hookah smoking caterpillar, is an inspiration from this person. Carol was inspired from De Quincey, okay, Thomas De Quincey, where we find that these references are being brought about by him from after reading the Confessions of an English Opium Eater by Thomas De Quincey. What we find here is that this is the primary source of information and the contents of the hookah. Okay, he has written in his journals that he has finished the first volume of De Quincey, and it had perfectly delighted him in reading so much and gathering so much information and everything. What we find here is that De Quincey's prodigy is that he was a wild child. Okay, he was friends with William Wordsworth, Charles Lamb, and even he was a fellow opium addict of Samuel Taylor Coleridge. Okay, so what we find here is that, like the caterpillar, De Quincey was sought out to be some of an intellectual personality who had penetrating insights about life. Okay, it seems that the certain aspects of this Wonderland's dream world that we are seeing is influenced by the second-hand experience of the drug reading or the reading about De Quincey. Okay, Carol's reading about De Quincey's description. Okay, so what we find here is that this space that has been created, this unmuttered self that has been created, what we find that this self has thoroughly been a model of De Quincey. Okay, though De Quincey was an classical, was, what can you say, a classically educated Victorian contemporary of Carol, but what we feel here is that this caterpillar, as we go on into this story, this caterpillar is not just Thomas De Quincey. Why? Because this caterpillar has multiple allusions to it. And one of the allusions that we get is that of the Greek philosopher, mathematician, and even a semi-divine mystic named Pythagoras. Okay, what we find here is that this kind of image, this kind of portrayal of Pythagoras is very odd for us. Why? Because in today's times we know Pythagoras because of his geometrical theorem, right? Of right angle triangle only, right? Which was a square plus b square equals to c square, right? Where a and b are the two sides of the triangle, and c is the hypotenuse, right? So what we find here is that in today's time that is the theorem, but in Carroll's time, Pythagoras was also known for several other theories and belief systems. Okay, in fashionable societies and overall, his teaching was concerned with metapsychosis. What we see here is that what it is actually. It is a transmigration and reincarnation of the soul. Pythagoras was concerned with all this kind of teachings and learnings of the transmigration and the reincarnation of the soul, and is suggested by the personification or the metamorphosizing of the caterpillar, because the caterpillar is dying and it will turn into a butterfly after all. Okay, similarly, when we go into this story, go into the movement of the story, what we find, the caterpillar asks her to come back when Alice was leaving. The caterpillar duly notes that she is being asked to recite a poem, but she can't recite the poem properly. Okay, so caterpillar duly notes that she recites the poem which is an incorrect one, and goes on to ask what size she would like to be, and Alice states that being 3 inches tall is a wretched height, which actually insults the caterpillar because it is actually 3 inches tall. Okay, so first of all, what we find here is that this Pythagorean caterpillar is actually questioning the sense of living of Alice. How? Because this caterpillar is talking about things. The interrogation that it is doing are strongly suggestive of Pythagoras' teachings. Okay, where it says that know thyself and moderations in all things and everything. Immediately upon the first encounter that Alice and this caterpillar face, the Pythagorean caterpillar addresses the first of these maxims, who are you? Right? প্রথমেই হচ্ছে জিজ্ঞেস করছে, the first question that this caterpillar asks is, who are you? Okay, so this teaching is actually knowing your own self, which is actually related or dictates of Apollo, the god. Okay, and Apollo is also concerned with the moderations in all things, right? So what we find here is that this Pythagorean caterpillar is asking the maxims or propagating the maxims which are actually related to the mythological world as it had been described before also. Okay, so the unsurety, Alice is unsure, right? And her answer that is that she cannot describe or give a certain sense to one single identity. Okay, she cannot give a certain sense. She cannot give a correct answer. Right. So Alice is so put out by this caterpillar's apparent rudeness that she begins to walk off. But the caterpillar calls her back and gives her another opportunity to resolve her identity crisis. Why this is so? Because if you know not yourself, you will never be able to know the whole world. তুমি নিজেকে যদি কখনো জানতে না পারো, তুমি জীবনে হচ্ছে অন্য কাউকে জানতে পারবে না বা জগৎকে জানতে পারবে না. It has been stated throughout in religious text, in all the mythological writings, you need to know oneself first in order to deal with this society. নিজেকে খোঁজো, নিজেকে জানো. And to know oneself, what you need to do? You need to keep your temper cool. নিজের মনের শান্তিটা হচ্ছে জানা দরকার. ক্লিয়ার? নিজের ব্যাপারে হচ্ছে জানা দরকার. কিসের জন্যে? কারণ তুমি যদি নিজেকে জানতে না পারো, তুমি যদি সবসময় একটা এক্সাইটেড স্টেজে থাকো, you won't be able to get hold of things that are beyond your reach. ঠিক আছে? একটা ফুল, consider yourself to be a flower. Consider yourself to be a leaf. If you keep on constantly moving, constantly fluttering, no bird, no animal, or no caterpillar, or no butterfly will sit on you. Okay? And the caterpillar, bird, butterfly, and whatever I told is a representative of your success. তুমি যদি কনস্ট্যান্টলি হচ্ছে ফিজিটি থাকো, তুমি কখনোই হচ্ছে সেই সাকসেসটাকে গেইন করতে পারবে না. অ্যান্ড ইট ইজ আ প্রুভেন ফ্যাক্ট. Unless you are calm, unless you are controlled, unless you have control over your emotions, you will not be able to achieve anything. Even if you achieve that, it will slip away from yourself. ঠিক আছে? ওই যে বলে না, still water runs deep. ঠিক similarly, you need to be still to get hold of everything that is happening in this world, whatever, and that is being said over here. What does the caterpillar say? Keep your temper. তোমার টেম্পারটাকে কন্ট্রোলে রাখো. And by hearing this, Alice is perplexed, but does follow this advice. Okay, she swallows her anger, so much she could do, and by this what we fear, or what we not fear but see over here, is that this Pythagorean tempering of this self, of this harmonic system, is actually the music or the bonding with one's soul. Okay, here caterpillar is teaching Alice the Pythagorean belief system, that through tempering the spirit, the mind is freed to control the physical problems of the body. Okay, so if you are at a calm state, তুমি যদি শান্তির মধ্যে থাকো, then you will be able to achieve over or do over any problem that is there in your life. Okay, it is a mind that makes a heaven of hell and a hell of heaven, right? এটা তোমার মাইন্ডই যেটা একটা হেলকে হেভেন বানিয়ে দিতে পারে, আর একটা হেভেনকে হেল বানিয়ে দিতে পারে. তুমি যদি সব কিছু পেয়েও বলো যে তোমার কিছু নেই, আমার কিছু পাইনি, তাহলে কি you will never be happy. But if you get the minimum thing and you are happy with that, then you will be the most happiest person ever. Right? So it all depends on your mind. So এখানেই কোয়েশ্চেন চলে আসে, তাহলে কি এটা শুধু হচ্ছে বাচ্চাদের গল্প? Is this really only for children? Actually no. There are several people, there are several adults who are in a state where they cannot control their emotions, they cannot control over their life. Okay, so caterpillar is asking her to be content with what she has. Okay, she is being asked, "Are you content now?" So the Pythagorean caterpillar advocates that the mental state needs to be in a meditative, calm way. Okay, so this is actually removed from the extremes of human emotions. You cannot expose yourself to the extremes. যখনই তুমি একটা এক্সট্রিম হিউম্যান ইমোশনসকে তোমার ডমিনেন্ট পর্যায়ে পৌঁছে দেবে, what will happen? It will actually enrage yourself or give a stamp to yourself. কিরকম? যদি তোর একটা এক্সট্রিম ইমোশন থাকে কি তুই রাগ করিস, if your extreme emotion is that of anger, then people will judge you as an angry person, right? তাকে বলবেই যে তুমি একজন অ্যাংরি মানুষ। বা হচ্ছে if you keep on crying continuously, you would be considered as a sentimental person, okay, or you will be called rondhu, right? Similarly, what we find here is that this extreme human emotions needs to be avoided, and that is being guided or said by the caterpillar in order to get over the problems that Alice is facing. So this story is not just a fairy tale, is not just a description of the life of what is of a child experiencing things, but it has more to it. It has more links or more stories, more guidance provided through the things that has been used. Okay, so more or less it can be said that or you can question that how this attainment is possible. Okay, how you will get over all the extremes of your emotions. It is not possible within a day. তুমি একদিনেই হচ্ছে তুমি একদম সেজ টাইপ হয়ে যাবে, তোমার কোনো রাগ হবে না, তোমার এক্সট্রিম ইমোশনসগুলো কোনোটাই হবে না, দুঃখ কষ্ট কোনোটাই হবে না। বাট সেইটার জন্য কি বলা হয়েছে, দ্য ক্যাটারপিলার সেজ আ থিং, ইউ উইল গেট ইউজ টু ইট ইন টাইম। ইউ নিড টু প্র্যাকটিস, ইউ নিড টু প্র্যাকটিস it. There will be difficulties obviously, একদিনে কোনো কিছু অ্যাচিভ করা যায় না, you cannot achieve everything within a single day, but what you need to do, you need to practice it with time, and you need to practice in such a way where you get to know the problems only after, or you get to know the solutions of the problems only after you have a self which is calmed down. Okay, Alice takes the advice of the caterpillar, though she faces some difficulty, but she accepts that. Alice manages to remain calm enough to understand the cryptic advice of the caterpillar. What we find here is that the growth or the change in size that is shown about Alice is not just about the physical growth. In this chapter, what we are seeing here is that there is this psychological growth which has been imparted or which has been advised to Alice. This psychological growth is very important for a person, because you will obviously grow biologically. With time you will grow biologically, but if it is that a man remains a child emotionally, then it would be very hard for that person to live in this cruel world. Clear? So what we find here is that this description is quite symbolic for a person, for any child who is growing up. Okay, you need to control your temper. Okay, so as the caterpillar who transforms from outward shape to another, right, as a butterfly, yet what we find remains the same entity, right? The caterpillar knows size and shapes are just illusions to the essential self. These are just illusions. একটা মানুষকে যদি প্লাস্টিক সার্জারি করেও দেওয়া হয়, তার মনটা যদি এক থাকে, ঠিক আছে, তাহলে কিন্তু সেই মেন্টালিটি তার সেই একই কাজ করবে. সাপোজ thief has done a plastic surgery and everything, but his mentality will still be the same even after doing plastic surgery, right? So what we find here is that Pythagoras's reputed ability to communicate physically with animals and people is mirrored by the caterpillar who reads Alice's thoughts. Okay, so what we find here is that in contrast to spiritual caterpillar, we have a spherical figure of the father William when we see that Alice is reciting the poem, and Alice is not able to recite the poem clearly. And it is a bit strange that the caterpillar knows about the poem which is of the real world. So what we find here is that this kind of self, this kind of reciting of the poem incorrectly is actually a symbol that this Alice has not calmed down. She has not in herself, she has not understood the whole meaning. She is trying, but she has not calmed down. What we find here is that this William is referred to the father William, and what we find here is that there are several illustrations of father William, and the caricatures are there in Benjamin Jowett's room. What we find here is that in this description that you are old father William is a parody of the popular the old man's comforts and how he gained them. Okay, so what we find here is that there is this hopeless moralizing sort of frequently taught to improve school children's minds. Okay, it was written by the poet laureate Robert Southey, who today is less remembered for his words than having written the first published version of Goldilocks. But what we find here is that this poem was actually taught to school children, and that is why Alice knows this. Okay, your old father William, the young man cried, goes Southey's version. Why this is so? Why this is important? Because it tries to impart, it has this moralizing tendency, it tries to impart the morals to the children. Okay, it tries to impart the morals to the children, and what we find is this is actually a memorizing tendency. ঠিক আছে, একটা পোয়েম মুখস্থ করে বলা is not imparting morals. Okay, and you might forget the poem. Then what happens? You actually you are forgetting what the poem's morals are. Clear? So if you are imparting the morals through the through the poems, if you are imparting morals through the poems, then what will happen? If the child forgets the poems, then that person will forget the morals, right? So it has been placed in contrast with the teachings of the caterpillar. Okay, মরালটা যেরকম শেখাবে, কিন্তু তার থেকেও কিন্তু একটা বেশি ইম্পর্টেন্ট জিনিস শেখার কি থাকে, সেটা শেখার থাকে হচ্ছে how you will be able to act in this real world when you face challenges. তখন কি করে হচ্ছে লাইফ লিড করবে সেইটা হচ্ছে ইম্পর্ট্যান্ট হয়ে দাঁড়ায়। Clear? That is why this has been put in um, contrast with the Pythagorean caterpillar's advice over here. Okay.